You know what? I hate the fact that there's money in politics, and this latest story really proves it. We have just gotten word that George Soros, you know him, he's spending $125 million in his SuperPac, which is run by his son, on the 2020 elections to make sure that people that, see eye to eye with his values are elected. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. I am Trish. Just a quick reminder, do make sure that you go to my Locals page. I'm going to be live there on Locals today answering your questions. I love hearing from you, so do join that. You can support the show. You can talk to me directly, all that good stuff at Locals. But I want to get back to what George Soros is doing because, to keep this in perspective, I realize we got inflation and everything, right? And bad inflation at that. But he spent $80 million, which was a record then, back in 2020, and now there are reports of $125 million. That is a lot of money. And the problem with all of this is it creates these perverse incentives in that politicians and those that want to be part of this gravy train, they are trying to do what one man wants. And anytime you have one person controlling the purse strings like that, I think it's just so fundamentally wrong. And this is why, you see Americans kind of getting fed up with the political cycle. Nobody trusts it because there's just a few players out there sort of controlling where all this money goes. There should be no money in politics. I hate that big businesses are donating. And I hate that there's these super PACs. It just feels so tainted. It really does, because how do you trust what politicians are doing when they know, by the way, they can't get elected without that big fat check? So everything comes back to money. And, in the case of Soros in particular, one of the things that's most disappointing is that you've seen a lot of the recent crime issues that we're struggling with as a nation. This whole defund the police movement is something that was actually backed by Soros and his team. And so, these are values that are being pushed, sort of shoved on Americans that I don't think everyday Americans always agree with, but because it's what the political class, the elite want, and are, by the way, paying for, it's what people wind up with. Quick reminder, again, I will see you on Locals. I want to tell you, before we get on to some of these other things, Biden warning Ukraine, we've got to talk about the Supreme Court. We've got to talk about inflation. Oh, we've got to talk about the new cat at the White House, the latest distraction. But before we get to all that, I want to give you a quick word from one of our sponsors, SelectQuote, SelectQuote.com. My family's insured. I certainly hope that your family is insured as well. And if it's not, this is your opportunity. This is your time to make sure that you do that, because it's a new year. And this is one of those things that you just want to tick off the list. It's really, really important. And you don't want any company for this, not just any company, because it's really important how you go about getting the insurance if you want to get the best life insurance policy possible. And that's why I recommend SelectQuote. For over 35 years, SelectQuote has been helping people to find the best possible policies. And they've helped people save 50% or more by shopping all these highly rated insurance carriers. I want you to hear this one. SelectQuote found a 40-year-old man with high blood pressure, a 10-year, $500,000 policy for only $19 a month. $19 a month. It's so affordable. There's no excuse. There's really no excuse for not having this or putting it off any more days. So protect your family right now. Make sure that you do that. Protect all that you've worked for. Go to SelectQuote.com where the quotes are 100% free, and you can just do this in a couple of minutes, and you can get your own quote today. Full details on sample policy and carrier ratings at SelectQuote.com/commercials. Prices could vary by health, issuing company, and other factors not available in other states. And also a quick reminder for you all, we got some really neat new merch. If you love freedom and you're a capitalist like me, you're going to love the store. So go and check out all our merch on the TrishRegan.store. Again, TrishRegan.store. Turning now to Ukraine. The president apparently has warned Ukraine. Wow. The White House is disputing this. There are reports, including in the Daily Mail, that sources were saying he so eloquently, because he's quite the public speaker, told the Ukrainian president that Kiev in a few weeks could get, quote, sacked. Now, again, the White House is disputing that, but he doesn't exactly have the best way with words. I'm thinking back to what he said about Peter Doocy most recently in that press conference when Doocy was asking about a question everybody needs answers to, inflation. By the way, we have the CEO of legacy precious metals coming up in just a bit. So I'm going to tease that for you. We're going to talk a little bit more about inflation, a little bit more about these GDP numbers that crossed recently. But again, back to here, Ukraine. Biden is warning that it could get problematic because Russia is looking perhaps to move into that territory. It'll be interesting to see where we come out on all this. We've got reports, of course, of troops being sent overseas and more on standby. As I've said all along, you know what? America will not forgive Biden if this turns into any kind of death for American soldiers. They are allegedly looking now at sanctions again, including perhaps sanctioning Vladimir Putin himself. I am all about using every little bit of financial power you can, because I would so much rather lose dollars than lives. I know some people, I don't know, Russia in the scheme of things represents that much economically, so it won't be so painful for us to sanction them. For example, to sanction China, given that we have so much business with China. But again, in light of everything that's happening, I keep going back to sanctions are a very good way. The world's biggest economy, hey, let's use it, right? As opposed to sending troops, let's use all the financial power we can, again, knowing that we would much rather lose dollars than lives. And so I'd like to see more sanctions coming forward. We'll see how this administration does this. We've already gotten reports from the State Department that they're reluctant. Blinken, of course, is reluctant to do that because he thinks that it's more of a deterrent if they threaten sanctions. Well, listen, you can only threaten so much. You need at some point to follow through. And we don't want to follow through on a military scale. We want to be able to use as much financial pressure as possible. So we'll see where that one goes. In the meantime, I want to report on this story. You know that the president had promised that he would appoint a female, and a black female at that, to the Supreme Court. According to a new survey out of Rasmussen, Americans expect him to do that. 59% of Americans expect him to do that, but they're not really happy about it. And I'll tell you why they're not that happy about it. Because since when did your gender or your race matter more than your intellect and your capability? This is still the United States of America. And I realize in this woke movement that's in part funded by the likes of SuperPacs from billionaires that want to spend $125 million on 2022. This is the problem, right? You've got all this money that's force feeding a set of values. And so then it becomes all about your race, your gender, as opposed to your capability, your intellect, etc. And so Americans don't like this. Everyday Americans are like, but wait a second, none of that should matter, right? I mean, going back to the words of Martin Luther King Jr., we really should be a colorblind society. We don't want to see race or gender first. We want to see who someone is as a person. And yet it's like all you can see, because they're making it that way so much that the person that's going to be appointed to the Supreme Court has to be female and has to be black. There's something really, I think, just off-putting about all of it. Another story that we're watching today that we really shouldn't be watching, but cats are cute, whatever. And hey, the White House is always looking for a distraction from things like Ukraine. Jill Biden got a new kitty cat. She's been eyeing this cat apparently since 2020 when it got up on stage with her during a speech, and now it's finally moving into the White House. They've had the problems with the dogs, the one that kept biting people, and then the other one who passed away, of course. There's still, I guess, another dog there, so the cat will have to learn to get along with that dog. But, cats may be a little bit easier than a dog. We've got some really interesting numbers out on the economy this week. GDP with a very, very impressive read. But is this for real? I just sat down with the CEO of one of the biggest gold companies in the world, Charles Thorngren. Take a listen. I'm so happy to have back on the program with me today, talk all about gold, talk all about how to diversify your portfolio, and talk a little bit about this economy, which is getting increasingly hard to make sense of. I have Charles Thorngren. He is the CEO of Legacy Precious Metals. Charles, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
I'm glad to be able to introduce you again. to the viewers and to the listeners, because they hear me talk about you guys all the time. We appreciate all your support on the show. But listen, this is something that I have believed in for a very, very long time, as long really as in my adult life. And that's the diversification of one's portfolio through gold and other precious metals, which I know is all about what you guys are about. So we're going to get to that. We're going to get to, how you do it, what you need to do. But I want to start first with your thoughts on what's going on right now. We got a sort of blowout GDP number, but a lot of people, including yours truly, are saying, wait a second, this may not be exactly as it looks. I mean, hey, I love good news, but I don't know if this is entirely all good news or whether it's really sustainable. What's your reaction to GDP numbers?
Amazing question. And really, there is some concern. 6.9, it's an astounding number. And I believe that every lame duck has his day, but I don't believe this is the case this time. I think you see a lot of opportunities for business to say, okay, we need that new machine. We know the economy's building back up. Let's get it now before we have to finance it at a much higher interest rate. And when you start to look at scenarios like that, it makes more sense, because to beat that number so heavily, you have to see something amazing. And we don't see something amazing in the economy. If we're being real about it, there's still 10 million jobs that need to be filled. I don't think the rest of us that are working are that flush with cash that we're moving the needle that much. It makes sense when we begin to unpack that this is really institutional investments into the infrastructure of big business, things that finance $1 million pieces of equipment.
Wow. So this is interesting because, a lot of people on, that have a political side, and a lot of people on the left have always said, well, we need more inflation, right? Because more inflation means, you'll get people buying stuff. Look, I'm well acquainted with the economies in Latin America. My first job actually was at Goldman Sachs trading emerging market debt, specifically in Latin America. So I'm well aware of how bad inflation actually can be on an economy and what it does in terms of eroding people's spending power. But I'm also aware of how it causes people and businesses to make like a mad dash, right? I got to buy this now. I got to buy this now, because if I wait a couple months, it's going to be so much more costly. And so it creates kind of this false sense of demand. We can get into the inflationary effect in a second, because it's one of the reasons why I like things like gold in that environment. But, what is it actually doing to everybody? Do you think that they're all kind of like, I got to do it now because, 6 months from now, it's going to cost that much more?
Absolutely. If you're looking to build a new location, if you're looking to update your machinery, if you're looking to find ways to become more effective through, purchase of machinery and things of that nature, now is the time to do it. We're beginning to see some of the supply issues fall. Okay. It's still an issue. We know that. We still go to the store. We see that, but it's getting better. Companies now are able to take orders for things. And to lock it in now before we see, 6-7% interest rate on equipment versus the free money policy that we have now, where you could probably get 2.5 to 3%. It's significant when you're talking about mechanical processes.
Right.
Millions of dollars of pieces of equipment. You want to get it at the best rate possible. And you want to get it on order as soon as possible, too, because we do have supply chain issues, right? So when we do come through this, they want to have the equipment available and cost effective. Plus, end of the year, you typically see tax write-off. Let's get this locked in this year so we can depreciate over the next 5 years. Sure. That plays a big part of it, Yeah. And I think, we're seeing part of that number too. Home restoration. It's not as big as the mechanical side, the industrial side. But people know interest rates are going up. So what are they going to do? They're going to get that home loan now. They're going to hire people now. So these are the things that really help bolster that number and give us that surprise upside that we didn't really count on.
It's the reason why it always bugged me way back when the Fed wouldn't move on rates, right? I mean, I've made the point that they should have moved 7-8 months ago. But even when it was very clear the economy was doing well, we saw median income growth pretty strong. We saw, a significant although I am always looking for more uptick in GDP. And I kept saying, but, the Fed isn't telegraphing that it's ever going to move on interest rates. So, why buy this equipment today when I can buy it tomorrow? Well, now all of a sudden we got the flip side. I mean, that's why I get so angry at the Fed, because it's like all or nothing, right? And now we get the flip side where we're like, oh, I got to buy it now because I may not be able to buy it for the same price 6 months from now or 3 months from now. So I hear you. I don't think this ends well, though, because, again, I go back to you want fundamental reasons, right, other than just I'm fearful that the price is going to go up for why you're making investments. And so what does it do to prices in the interim and therefore to people's savings?
Yeah. And again, I think what we're going to see higher inflation. We have this false sense that everything's fine now. And we're also going to see something that I'm not really a fan of. We're going to see the Fed, and they talked about it. They're going to do a roll off of their debt rather than a sell off of their debt. Mm-hmm. And it's inherently different. A roll off is going to take so long to get that debt off of its books. And what we really need to be talking about now is us rolling into stagflation.
Okay, we get into stagflation is happening, you think?
I do. I mean, they're going to say no with the 6.9 number. But if we're realistically looking at the scenario, we're going to have higher interest rates. We don't have the workforce that we want. We know those two numbers are bad. And the economy isn't doing as good as they're leading us to believe, right? Those are your three key factors for stagflation. We're basically there.
One of my concerns has been this interim period, right? Because, 6.9% for the quarter, that's great. Whether or not it's sustainable, there's a lot of doubt around that. But my concern is we're going to have this period where we have to kind of figure out how to make do with less in terms of staffing and labor, unless people decide to go back to work. And maybe at some point, they'll feel less flush and they'll go back to work. But right now, it doesn't look like that. We keep getting more and more numbers of people that have quit their jobs. So if that's the case, companies have to pay more for labor. I don't think they've really baked that into their earnings scenario. And that's my concern. Like, it's going to take some time to kind of transition. We've built an economy, under certain assumptions. You plug it into the algebraic equation, A plus B is C. And now it's like A plus Z. We don't know what it equals.
It's true. And unfortunately, like we were saying a little earlier, you need an active Fed to fight in these scenarios. We have a disconnected Fed. And I don't think it matters who the chairman is. If we're going to be real honest, we're not going to say Chairman Powell is responsible. It is a committee. He may head it. But we've seen this disconnected Fed for many years now. Many election terms. The Fed is a lot more involved in politics now than it is in economy. And it was never meant to be that way. But
I don't like that.
Here we have it.
Yeah. No, I don't like that. I wondered, why didn't Jerome Powell and company, right? Because again, we can't put it all on him. Why didn't they raise back in January, of 2021? We had already had 2 stimulus checks. The economy was out of the woods, or at least by February or March, where, it looked like things were dissipating a little bit in terms of the virus because the vaccine was available. So people were going back out and participating in the economy again. And yet, Charles, it was the perfect opportunity and they didn't move. Why?
It's interesting. And there is no good answer. That's the problem. And I'll take it a little further back. Why didn't we stop QE when President Trump was in office? There was no need for that program then. We had an economy. By the way,
he hated it. I'll never forget my interview with him at the White House in October of 2018. And the Fed was indicating, it wanted to move higher on rates at that time. Of course it did. Because, look, our economy was doing great. As I mentioned before, median incomes were doing great. It was really wonderful to see. There was no inflation. It was an appropriate time to kind of, basically, yes, set the stage so that you'd have more room in the future, more runway.
Right.
Oh, was he furious. We made a lot of news on that one because, it was unusual for a president to come out slamming the Fed. But he really didn't want that, of course, because he's looking around and saying, well, the ECB is cutting,
right.
And Japan, we know Japan, like all these other economies are willing to flood the system with cash. Powell got a big political response that was very verbal. And that's, perhaps a different style. Donald Trump had a different style than, say, this president. But I suspect this president is sort of behind the scenes through various channels, also putting a kind of pressure. And that's why I wondered when he first came into office, was there a sense that, okay, well, we don't want to raise rates immediately because this could hurt the incoming president?
I think it even extends beyond that. I don't think they wanted to raise rates through the course of the year because the current president was doing so bad elsewhere. He has one thing to point to. It's the stock market. That's the only thing he has. Yeah. And can he even point to that now? The past week has scared people, as they should be. A market that has that much flexibility for nothing is a market you need to worry about.
I know. I mean, it's so much volatility. And, you and I have talked about this in the past, but, people are not traders. And it's kind of hard to I mean, it's up 600. It's, down 20. And you're like, wait, how does that happen all within the span of a day? Wait, it was up 600 and it closed down that, or it was down 1,000 and then, basically closes at the flat line. It's amazing how much volatility there is. And so I guess my question would be, what do you think the market's telling us about the future?
The market's telling us exactly what we know. It's not sure either. It's concerned.
Yeah.
This is institutions telling you the future path is not as clear as we want to tell you that it is. Yeah. It's more of, watch my actions, don't listen to what I say, is really what we're looking at here. Because you see the market move that hard. As much as I'd like to believe that we, the people, are in charge of the market, we are not. 70% of all the trading that happens in the equities market is computer-based. Okay? We have algorithms for that. So customer sentiment is important over the long term. The day-to-day stuff, the market told you itself it's not comfortable where it's at. When you learn to read and you see that, it's telling you it's worried. Yeah. And that means we should be worried as well. Most of us, like you said, we're not day traders. We want to put our money away and know that when it's time to retire, we can play golf, we can go on vacation, we can do all those things without worrying about Social Security, which I don't even want to talk about Social Security right now with interest rates going up and everything else.
By the way,
another day to talk about that.
The messed up Social Security is another reason why I think, the long-term trajectory, you can't just keep spending money that you don't have. At some point, it's not going to work anymore. And I don't know if that's because, look, we've got the benefit of being the world's reserve currency. I don't know, I hope that stays forever, but, who knows, given
it never does.
Given the messed up fundamentals of what we're spending and to your point, Social Security, which brings me sort of full circle to, how do you protect yourself? How do you do that? And everybody says that to me, like, how do I protect myself in this environment? And you know me, Charles, I preach diversification, and part of that includes precious metals. Part of that includes gold. There are other ways to do it as well. But I really think that, having that sort of peace of mind, I know in my own portfolio, gold is something I look at and I'm like, okay, that's just like there forever. I have no interest in selling it. So it doesn't matter when it goes down. I'm happy when it goes up. I feel good about having it when the market gets this volatile. But what do you tell people? How should they be thinking about precious metals overall?
Gold and silver, precious metals, that's your ultimate currency when we look at it, right? Mm-hmm. We look at dollars and we look at our investments, but what we're looking at is our purchasing power. Mm-hmm. That's how we look at things, right? What can I do with this dollar, widget, whatever we want to call it, this share of stock? What does it mean to me? It means I can do certain things in my life. It gives me the ability to purchase the things that I need and live the life that I want. Well, gold is the ultimate currency. It's the first one. It's the one that comes without a government attachment to it. It's real. It's tangible. It's not fiat. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what gold does for us, it gives us the ability to live the life we want because gold is always going to be worth something and what it's worth. If you look through time, you remove inflation from things. Gold is solid. It's standard. Inflation moves the value of gold. Okay. The weaker a currency gets, the more currency it takes to buy that gold. That's stability. That's why gold and silver should be the foundation of the house you're building for retirement. It's solid. It's stable. It will hold the rest up. A good basis in precious metals allows you to go out and take risks in other areas so that you can see greater potential gain because you know you have a solid foundation, a base point where you don't have to worry. And that's what it's meant to do. It's the ultimate security.
What about those who say, well, gold's not performing the way I thought, given that there's so much inflation in the economy? What do you tell them? Just wait, or are you happy with the performance?
If you haven't bought it yet, you should be thrilled, right? It's still on sale. But
really, no,
it all balances out in the end. Gold is not a short-term investment. We're not traders here. I'm not going to give you the hot gold coin tip of the day. It's not going to happen, right? And you don't want that. There are places to do that. Some say the stock market, some say Vegas. You can argue whichever way you want to go. But gold is the long term, right? And what you don't see today, it's going to go where it needs to go. It always does. It always will.
No, it does. I've told you the story before about telling a family member to buy gold back when it was $300, less than $300, and she's pretty happy she did. I mean, it's one that even if let's say, Charles, there's not going to be 6% or 7% inflation each year. I'm looking at consumer prices now, and producer prices are even worse. But suppose we're actually going to what the Fed wants, which is 2 to 3% inflation.
Right.
I'm still like, well, wait a second. That's 2 to 3% inflation.
That means over
time is a problem.
Yeah, over the course of your life, if you live to be 70, everything costs 2.5 times as much. Basic math. At 3%. And what we do know is the Fed can't keep that number. They've never been able to keep that number. It bounces all the time. And we go from a low number to a high number. Again, when you get that gold, you get that stability. So when the government can't do its job, which doesn't shock some of us, it's okay. We're protected.
That matters. Let me ask you sort of the mechanics of it, because people are like, okay, this feels a little intimidating. What do I do? How do I buy? Maybe a lot of people don't necessarily want to go the ETF route. A lot of people I know want the actual physical stuff, which is a little bit more complicated. It's easy, I guess, if we talk to you, but it's a little more complicated than it may seem because, buying gold, it needs to be transported. It needs to be secured.
Right.
You need to figure, am I going to have it at my house? Do I have it in my safe deposit box at the bank? Do I do a gold-backed IRA? I mean, what are the options for this?
All those are great options. And I would say if you have IRA money, you should absolutely have an investment in precious metals, right? In the IRA, it's going to be stored for you. Just like any IRA, you can't hold the metals yourself. Government doesn't trust us is really what it comes down to. They want to make sure that they get their taxes for it. So it's going to be held for you. The great thing about an IRA, when it does come time to retire, you have the ability to take that distribution as the metals if you want and have them shipped to you. Most people aren't aware of that. So you don't have to lose your investment like you do with a lot of things in an IRA. If you want to take that distribution, you have to sell and take cash. With gold, you don't have to. Silver, you don't have to. If you're purchasing metals outside of an IRA, you can store it at the safe deposit box at the bank. You can get a safe at the house, I tell people, and it surprises them, but $1 million worth of gold, you can store it in a shoebox.
That's amazing to me. I actually learned that from you. And I quote that because I had no idea. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I mean, you're going to have some good security, of course.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
It's not as heavy or cumbersome as people would think. Look, I think it's a smart diversification tool. I really do. What about if you're looking at silver, you're looking at copper? I mean, these are. I look at copper and say maybe that's more a play, correct me if I'm wrong, on a long-term economic bet that there's going to be global growth, right? And therefore a need for copper.
Right. A big issue for copper, and you can do it, but I would make that an ETF play myself, because copper is traded in tons. Unless you have a lot of acres, you want to make sure you play that in electronic form. But the gold and silver, controllable. You can take possession of it, much easier to do. And the thing that copper doesn't have that I really like to see is a connection to a currency, right? Gold and silver are still connected to currencies.
Yeah. Why do you like the connection to currency?
It has a place of value that people understand, right? We all understand what a dollar is. We all understand what a dollar does and what it doesn't do. So when you have something that's based as a unit, and to this day, the government still prints currency with gold and silver. There are gold coins and there are silver coins that have face values on them. So when it's connected to a currency aspect like that, when it's minted by a governmental mint, you have the ability to have world recognition. You could take a gold eagle anywhere in the world. They're going to know what it is, and you can trade it in for the local currency.
That's sort of amazing. I mean, I think in treacherous times, but even in good times, I mean, one of the interesting things about gold, I guess, is that even in a really good, yes, when it's treacherous and it's scary out there, your gold, I think, has value because it's treacherous and scary out there. But simultaneously, Charles, even when things are really good, right? People are buying gold jewelry, people are investing in gold more. It's kind of one of those investments that can play both sides of the coin.
Right. And it does. And, I was recently reading an article in the Financial Times, and they were talking about President Putin and his portfolio breakup. 13% in the yuan, 20% in the US dollars, and 21% in gold. Now, in our industry, we call that the desperado portfolio, because you can go anywhere in case you get exiled. But you look at that and you see this is a person who, right now, things are really good for Russia. They're so good, they're looking at expanding what the territories of their country are. And even he, who's in charge, has a 21% of his portfolio basis in precious metals and gold. So, it's one of those things, like you said, in bad times, you're thankful you have it, but in good times as well. It has value through the course of time. If we believe that there should be inflation every year, you should have gold. You got to offset it.
Yeah, and there is inflation happening every year. And right now, really bad inflation, I predict. By the way, going back full circle to the GDP numbers, what does this mean for inflation, do you think? Do you have any predictions?
I think we're going to hit double digits before they do anything. I know they're talking. I know they're talking March, but this number is going to change that parameter. It's going to change that parameter.
Is there any chance in your view, by the way, I don't know why they're waiting till March. I'm like, by the way, I'll believe it when I see it, but is there any chance that they punt, they delay? I mean, given the challenges we're facing right now overseas in Europe, with Ukraine and Russia, do you worry that the Fed will say, well, maybe next time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think we're going to see a rate change until maybe June.
Gosh. Wow. Well, that's going to come with all kinds of unintended consequences. All the more reason to be thinking long and hard about your portfolio right now. We've been talking with Charles Thorngren. He's the CEO of Legacy Precious Metals. And I know you guys are a family-run business. You've been around a long time. I encourage people to call your number, which we have on the bottom of the screen, to call you guys and to sort out what you need to do in your portfolio right now just to protect part of your assets, which is so critical for all of us. Charles, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Again, my thanks to Charles for that interview. If you're investing in gold or interested in getting into this space, give him a call, 1-866-589-0560, 1-866-589-0560. Tell him you saw him on the show, and he'll help you out. He and his team can really help you navigate this space, which is a challenging one if you're not familiar with it. LegacyPMInvestments.com is their website, and they've got a free investing guide that you can download there. Just a quick reminder, everyone, do make sure that you go to my website, TrishIntel.com, that you sign up for my newsletter, that you go to Locals, TrishRegan.locals.com, and sign up for my community there. All of this is free. I'm so excited to have you here. Do me the favor as well of making sure that you subscribe to this channel if you're watching. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, the like button, and I'll see you back here tomorrow.